still in the life of Jesus. We've been in the life of Jesus now for almost 2 years. Y'all have noticed. But learn something new here. We keep learning something new, don't we? So it's not like it's a waste of time. It's and you got to realize the disciples, the apostles, spent about 3.5 Jesus with most of the 4 years with Jesus. So it took them that long to learn about him. So it's not saying 2 years is too long to study the life of Jesus. All right, so we're in John now, and the title today is "Don't Tell Jesus How to Be the Messiah," and you'll see why it's called that today. So we're in John chapter 7, verses 1 through 10, and this is talking about that Jesus had kind of the Pharisees were trying to kill him again. Right? He had been into Jerusalem. They weren't real happy with him. They were kind of plotting against him. So he was kind of staying away from Judea and away from Jerusalem. And so John wrote, "After this, Jesus went around in Galilee." Now remember, he's from Galilee. That's where Nazareth is, and that's kind of the northern part of Israel up around it. And it's real close. There's a lot of Romans in Galilee, and so it's kind of like that's kind of the backwater to them, right? He did not want to go into Judea because the Jewish leaders were looking for a way to kill him. But when the Jewish festival of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, "Leave Galilee and go to Judea so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to be a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world." For even his own brothers did not believe in him. Now that's very important. That last part right there is interesting. Because if you would, let's look at this, all right? So one, how were Jesus' brothers wrong about him? Now, let's ask this question. Did they believe he was the Messiah? And think before you answer. Look at what they're telling him to do. Think about it. What are they telling him to do?
Go out in public and make it known to everybody.
Right, so did they believe he was the Messiah?
Yeah.
Apparently they did. See, this is one that, hey, when we said he didn't believe in him, they go, well, they didn't believe he was Messiah. No, actually, look at the story. Look at what they're saying. They're telling him, go to Jerusalem with your disciples and go make you some more disciples. Go let everybody know that you're Messiah. Get this thing rolling.
I just didn't think he was doing it right.
Yeah, it's also saying, well, if you really are the Messiah,
Right.
why don't you go out and prove it? So,
Now, here's an interesting thing. When you go back to his first trip to Jerusalem, who went with him? His disciples, his mother, and his brothers. Right? Now, let's think about his brothers. How long have they known Jesus? Right, so most of them, they're in their 20s because Jesus is around 30, so most of them are probably in their 20s, so 20-some years. They've been around Jesus a long time. Have they ever seen Jesus sin?
no.
Has everything they've ever seen Jesus do been perfect?
Yes.
Right? Now, we can say, if you've been around somebody who you have never caught doing anything wrong ever, right? Would you think there was something special about him?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and not only that, but think about how many times because he was a peacemaker, how many times did he probably dissolve an argument?
Yeah.
Like his brothers were getting on top of each other, he's like, wait a minute, y'all, what are y'all doing?
Yeah. He's a perfect big brother.
Right. I mean, so they had to have known. Now then, there's also the stories they probably heard from their mom and dad about his miraculous birth. Right? So they had proof that he was the Messiah.
Right.
I mean, they have proof that he was Messiah. And here, they're like, well, if you're the Messiah, go do Messiah stuff.
Right.
Right? Now, for a little bit, they had actually been following him around somewhat. But what apparently has kind of happened here?
It wasn't on their terms. They didn't like it.
Right. Right? So how were they wrong about him? They weren't wrong that he was the Messiah. They were wrong in how they thought he should be the Messiah.
That's right.
Right? Now, so we ask the question, what does it mean that they did not believe in him? Because it doesn't mean they didn't believe he was the Messiah. It was that they didn't believe he was the type, they didn't believe that he was who he really was. Does that make sense? Okay, let's think about this. In this area, do a lot of people know a lot of stuff about Jesus?
Somewhat. Yeah, we believe.
Yeah, we know all kinds of stuff about Jesus. You know, I've been going to school now, learning stuff about Jesus for a long time. I can tell people stuff I can spend the rest of my life making a living telling people all about Jesus. Right? Did they believe that people should be disciples of Jesus?
Not according to Jesus' terms.
Okay, wait, not according to Jesus, but in their terms, would they have said, yes, I believe that Jesus, people should be disciples of Jesus?
It's the right kind of Messiah that delivers.
Yeah. He's like, you need to go up to Jerusalem and make some more disciples. You need to get on this making disciples thing, Jesus. That's funny, ain't it?
You need to get on this being a disciple.
See, you see where they're looking at? They're going to agree, as far as they understand, they agree with Jesus. As far as they understand. Right? They agree that his birth was miraculous. He's never done anything wrong. He's the Messiah. Everything he teaches is right. He's making disciples. He needs to be making disciples. He needs to go up to Jerusalem and make some more disciples. Right? You need to get this Messiah. If you're the Messiah, Jesus, you need to get on this Messiah disciple-making thing and let us know when you get to the point that it's going on. Because what have they been doing? Okay, let's think about it. Apparently Joseph's out of the picture, right? Means he's probably dead. Jesus was supposed to be carrying on the family business. He wasn't. So what were they doing? What were his brothers busy doing?
Working.
Yeah, they had a business to run.
Probably taking care of Mary.
Right. I mean, they had stuff to take care of. They were busy. Now, were they bad people? No. They were good, hard-working people, right? Who believed, as far as they understood, in Jesus, who agreed that what Jesus said was right and good, agreed that Jesus was a good person, agreed that people should be disciples of Jesus, agreed that Jesus should be out being the Messiah, making disciples of Jesus. But they were just a little too busy, weren't they? They were too busy, and not being a bad person, they were just too busy being a good person. Do you see that? That, like Todd said, what was the problem here? They weren't disciples of Jesus. They had every opportunity to be disciples of Jesus. They had more opportunity to be a disciple of Jesus than anybody who up until this point.
That's right. That's right.
They had more reason to be a disciple of Jesus than anybody up until this point. They had heard him speak his whole life.
Probably bored with it.
Okay, but yeah. But why would you be bored with it, though? Here's the question. Why would you be bored with it?
Not really 100% there.
Right.
But you pointed out something. Mary told the younger brothers, half-brothers, what Gabriel had said, because she pondered those things in her
Right.
heart. And one of the things is he'll be great, and the throne of David will be given to him, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there'll be no end.
Right.
So that's the only Messiah they wanted.
So we're getting to that. So let's think about that. Who do they think, if their brother really is the Messiah, now they know they're descended from David, they know that.
Yeah.
And that would be great pride. Because if you're a descendant of David, you could possibly legitimately be the king of Israel. And there's only a small group of people. It's not like the majority of people in Israel were descended from David. There's only a small group of people who were physically descended from David. And in their case, and it depends on, they probably knew this, they were descended from David on both sides of their family.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
I mean, this is a source of pride. My dad's a descendant of David on Solomon's side. My mom's a descendant of David on the son that you actually could be king from too. And really, to be king of Israel, you had to actually be descended from both of these to fulfill the prophecy. So they're kind of like, hey, you know what? We're descended from David on both sides of the family.
Royal family.
Right? Yeah, we're royalty, man. We are the heir. We're actual legitimate heirs to the throne. You're the firstborn of us. You actually can be the king legitimately, because the guy who is in there now is not a descendant of David. He's not even Jewish. Right? According to them, he's not Jewish. They're like, look, you could be the actual king of Israel.
So they want him to take his kingship and start bumping heads.
Right, so you need to get this Messiah, King of Israel thing rolling, brother. Look, because you know what? We're kind of getting tired of building these houses. You know, We can be up living in the temple. We can be up living in the temple instead of building these little mud and wood houses. How about you go up to Jerusalem with you and your disciples, because we ain't got time to be your disciple. And you get this ball rolling, and when you get this ball rolling, we'll be up there with you. Right? I mean, you have to kind of read between the lines of what's being said here and what's being. And so the thing is, again, his brothers aren't bad people. Not only that, their beliefs at this point in time are considered the correct beliefs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All the Jews would have agreed what y'all believe is so. In to the other Jews around them, right? These were good people who believed the right thing, right? And as far as they understood, they believed in the right person. It's just the person, he wasn't quite doing exactly what they wanted him to do.
They even came to seize him the first trip.
Right.
Because they didn't like the way he was doing it.
Yeah, we're coming to that
Oh,
in a
you're
couple
coming
weeks.
to that too?
Yeah, we're coming to that in a couple weeks.
That's how much they were against
Right.
how Jesus chose
Right.
to do it.
So they're looking at him going, okay, if you're the Messiah, come to this Messiah thing. So now let's ask this question. It's easy to sit back and make fun of them, right? It's easy to sit back and make fun of them. In what ways do we try to tell Jesus how to be the Messiah?
Oh my, our terms.
Right. So we have just like they had their religious culture, we have our religious culture, don't we?
Right.
And we agree that Jesus is the Messiah. We agree that Jesus' teachings are correct. We believe that people should be disciples of Jesus. But it just needs to fit into this. Right? But we get you, Jesus, but I need you to take that and fit it in this box, Jesus.
Fit it to my life. I don't really want to lose my life. I don't want to
Right.
forsake all. I don't want to submit to everything that you say.
Because what would it have cost his brothers to be his disciples?
Everything.
Yeah, they would have had to lay down that family business, wouldn't they? And you know, we kind of get this idea that they're poor. I don't know that they're all that poor. If they're good contractors, they're not that. I mean, really, carpenter, a better translation. That's probably contractor, building contractor. That's what they did. They didn't just sit around and carve wood. They were probably building houses. Yeah, and anything made out of wood, which was the material you go to. So they were probably very busy people, probably maybe even wealthy.
The wealth of Rome was in Galilee. Tiberias
Right.
was made from scratch, and so they hired a lot of Jewish people.
Right. So they were working.
Oh yeah, they had plenty of work.
Right, you see what I'm saying? So one of the things it would have come, now, let's take that to our area. Again, we've talked about this before. In our area, because of the economics after World War II, it was really beginning before World War II, but really after World War II, it really took off in our area. And the industry came into our area. It took off. People went from farmers, took the work ethic they had from farming, took it and applied it to industry, and we got very wealthy very quick in this area. Right? Now, again, there's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong making money working hard. Unless it gets in the way of you being a disciple of Jesus. So again, is there anything wrong with his brothers being contractors and making money? No. Where did the problem begin?
That's where the emphasis was.
Right. When they were too busy doing that to really pay attention to Jesus. In fact, it's kind of like, look, Jesus, we're busy. You know, we're busy. You go do your thing. When you get that set up, okay, we'll be there. But until then, we got our thing going on. You got your thing going on. Can you imagine having spent 20-some years around Jesus and being that way? But again, people, do we not do that in this area?
Sure, miss out.
They've been around Jesus their whole life. Sang songs about Jesus their whole life, read the Bible about Jesus their whole life, heard Sunday school lessons about Jesus their whole life, heard sermons about Jesus their whole life, heard people talk about Jesus their whole life. But when it comes to the brass tacks of the matter, we're a little too busy. When it comes down to not just, okay, am I going to agree that Jesus is the right way, but I'm actually willing to sacrifice, willing to leave something behind, willing to lay down whatever it is I have to lay down. And it may not be a business, you know. It may not be a business, it may be just something else. There's always something that we have to lay down to follow Jesus. Everybody has something.
Could be family. That's what Jesus
Right.
said. Could be family.
And so they're looking at when it came into, they needed to lay something down to follow Jesus, that's where the line wasn't crossed. And this is the same thing we've got going on. It's not that people are bad people. You know what I mean? It's just that when it crossing that line to where it cost me something to follow Jesus as Messiah. So instead of me following Jesus as Messiah, me being his disciple, I decide to tell Jesus how he needs to be the Messiah and how he needs to make disciples of Jesus. All right, so how do we properly respond to Jesus as Messiah? What would have been the proper response of his brothers to Jesus? Well, I mean, it's just simple. They should have done what?
Followed him.
Abandoned all, follow him as his disciple.
And they might have kept their business, might not. That's up to the Lord.
Right, and you know, and it's obviously, like in the case we talk about, like Peter and them, that they gave up the business. They probably didn't give up the business. They just left the business in the hired hands. Because we see James and John. It's not their dad Zebedee stayed and kept running the business. I mean, Peter was probably a partner with them, and so it's not like they left the fishing boats there and they rotted by the seashore. It's just that they weren't there minding their business, right? All right. So now, in the case of Matthew, though, what did Matthew have to do?
He left it all.
Now he completely abandons his business because his business is collecting taxes.
Wasn't much of a business.
Yeah, it was good money making business.
Very good money.
Good money making business, but he actually does. So you have these two right here where you see we have different levels of it. You have where like James and John, they leave the business, but it's not like the business collapses. Business keeps running, and they still can inherit it. Because you see what happens at the end of John's gospel. What do?
And they fall back on it for a
Yeah, the boats are still there, the company's still there, the business is still there.
Right.
I mean, the boat, if they just left the boat sitting there, it wouldn't have been in any condition just to hop on it and go fishing all of a sudden. The business was still up and running. Right? So there's different levels of it. For them, it was kind of walk away. You just don't run the business anymore. And ultimately, they do leave the business. They're not long part of the business anymore because they become full-time apostles, full-time pastors. But in the case of Matthew, it's like, look, Matthew, you got completely and totally leave your business. Then there's other people who run their business because they're the ones who are giving money to Jesus, keeping him alive.
That's right.
All right. So this is what Jesus replies to his brothers. He says, therefore Jesus told them, my time is not yet here. For you, any time will do. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I am not going up to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. After he had stated this, he stayed in Galilee. However, after his brothers had left for the festival, he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Now, people say, did Jesus lie there? He didn't lie. What he's saying was, what he was saying to them, I'm not going to the festival in the sense that you want me to go to the festival. Right? Now, and what he's saying is, look, it's not my time. And when it is my time, it's not going to work out the way you think it's going to work out. Right? Y'all are wanting me to ride in as the king of Israel. I will one day ride in as king of Israel, and then I will be rejected as the king of Israel. I'll be crucified, and then another day I'm going to come back again in a couple thousand years as really the king of Israel. Right? He's like, but can they understood that? So did he even bother explaining it to them? Now see, this is where we get frustrated, ain't it? We have our box. We want Jesus to fit in, but it's much more complicated than that. And then Jesus doesn't give us a written explanation.
We're not ready for it. We're not going to take it.
Right, because then if he woke up one morning and there's a stack of papers on our whatever, right there, kitchen table, and it's a full explanation from Jesus what's going to happen. We'd read it, what would we be like? I don't think that really came from Jesus. Because Jesus wouldn't do that.
That's why he said, if you have ears to hear, let them hear. Because
Right.
he realized most people aren't going to really listen to him.
Right, so let's ask this question. How well does our timetable mesh with God's?
Good question.
It doesn't very well, does it? If we just think about, if we can tell God what we want him to do when, would life look completely different than it does? Right, so apparently our timetable doesn't mesh very well to his. Right, we don't need to be trying to work God into our timetable. What do we need to be trying to do? Right. So in what areas does our timetable not mesh with God's? So what are some areas of life that our timetable don't mesh with God's? Work, right? what's going on in the world right now? Would we want the mess going on? If we can decide, hey, you know what's going on in the world right now doesn't need to go on, wouldn't we? Or we would limit it to the amount of time that it can go on. But God's not. Right? So we talk about how his brothers, we kind of point at them and we say, look, you guys, you just didn't get it. But we need to take a look in the mirror, don't we? And how many times do we just not get it? And listen, the only reason I'm preaching this to y'all because this is what I have to preach to myself on a regular basis. Because believe me, my timetable and God's timetable do not mesh well. I have my timetable the way I think some things should work out. Ask me how many times that has actually happened. Very, very rarely. Right? Okay. So how often do we expect God to do something different than what he has planned to do? Right. How do we react when God does something different than what we expect?
I don't understand.
I don't understand.
Why, God?
Right. This can't be it. This can't be God's plan. This can't be right. Something must have happened. But, when we say that out loud, it sounds ridiculous. But then how often do we actually live our life like that? Bro, we don't say it out loud, but if you really look at the way we live and the way we get, and this is me, and the way I get upset at things, right? When I get upset at things, what am I saying? I'm saying, God, you shouldn't have let this happen. God, you don't have this under control. God, if I was running this show, I'd do a better job than you are right now because I would have changed this, this, and this. Right? Okay, let's look. Is that not what his brothers are saying? Look, if you're the Messiah, this is the way you need to do this. Because this is the way we expect this to happen. You know? And then there's some nice cushy rooms up in that palace for us.
We like cushy.
Right. And that's really what it comes down to an awful lot, ain't it? We agree with Jesus, who he is. We agree that he's never done anything wrong. We agree he's perfect. We agree that people should be his disciples and somebody should be making disciples of Jesus.
But we want that cushy room.
But when you get that whole thing taken care of, Jesus, right, we'll be there. When you get this whole thing sorted out and it gets to the point where it's comfortable, Jesus.
He's our John the Baptist. Make the way straight for us.
Right. Right. Instead of him being Jesus. Because again, they're telling him he needs to go up to Jerusalem and make disciples of Jesus. Who really needs to be going up to Jerusalem and making disciples of Jesus? They do. I mean, let's really look at it. It's really, what they're doing is completely and totally backwards. They're telling Jesus he needs to go make disciples. What does Jesus tell us before he leaves? You need to go make disciples. And you're like, because how long, and again, his disciples only been there a couple of years. At this point, really about a year. How long have his brothers been with him? 20-something. Should they, by this point in time, been able to make a disciple of Jesus?
Oh my God, sure.
Right. If they truly believed in Jesus, would they be sitting there trying to talk Jesus into go make disciples of Jesus? You know, but let's look, what do? Jesus, you need to really get on this disciple-making thing in my area so that when you've made a bunch of them, I can join in with them.
He said, you go out and do it yourself.
Right? Well, really, what was stopping his brothers besides their unbelief? That's it. What was stopping them from them going up to Jerusalem and making disciples of Jesus? Absolutely nothing. Other than their fear and their unbelief.
Because they were afraid because of
Right.
Jesus, who he was.
Right.
When people knew they were his real brothers,
Right.
that they would be in trouble.
He was
Right.
getting
It's like if we go up there and start making disciples of you, they'll kill us, Jesus.
Yeah, that's right.
So you go up there and you make disciples. When you got enough disciples made,
We'll go.
and the thing's cushy, and there's rooms in the palace for us, we'll join you. Right? And Jesus said, look, it's not going to work out the way you think this is going to work out.
Yeah, they were arguing who would be the greatest, right, even before his crucifixion.
Yeah.
And the mother, James and John, was saying, hey, I want you to have one son. And he's like saying, you're missing it. You don't even get it.
Right, and that's what his brothers... Now, here's kind of the interesting thing. he says it. So he went publicly, but so does he beg and plead with his brothers?
No,
Does he argue with them,
no,
or does he just go on doing what he's going to go on to do?
that's right.
So here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Well, if God wanted us to do something different, He'd come down and do something extravagant to get our attention, to make us do something different. No, don't sit around waiting on that.
He'll find people in a small circle, like
Right.
three, who want to follow him on his terms, and his family doesn't get it.
Right. So let's think about this. What do we want? What do we want? I mean, just as human beings, what do we want for this to happen? We want this big show to happen, this big thing to happen, and when this big thing happens, that's what his brothers are wanting. Hey man, it's the time for the festival. You go up there and you do a big thing.
Well, it's gonna be a big thing.
Right. Well, here's the thing. There's going to be a big thing, but there's already been a big thing.
A bigger thing.
Right. What did he tell the Pharisees? You're going to get one sign. I'm sure you got more signs, but really you only get one that matters, and that's me rising from the dead. The one big thing's already happened. The one big thing is enough to go, okay, we're going to go make disciples of Jesus. I'm not sitting around waiting on, y'all know how my affinity for Jim Putman. It's not Jim Putman so much, but really his program. What we're going to do is we're going to sit around, I'm going to send letters to Jim Putman, tell Jim Putman he needs to come plant a church in this area. And when Jim Putman comes and plants a church in this area,
We'll get on board.
I'll get on board. Or when David Platt comes and plants a church in this area, I'll get on board. Or whoever. But is that not really our mentality? I mean, it's like when somebody big comes and does this, and it gets comfortable and it gets cushy, and they make it easy for us. Well, then we'll join in on the disciple making thing, right? But and then we think, and if God wants us to do something different, He'll give this big sign telling us we need to do something different. No. Jesus said, that's fine. Y'all keep doing what y'all are doing. Y'all just go on doing what you're doing. See, this is the one that gets you, because I feel like God should just start knocking people's heads in. I mean, that's just, He should strike some people with lightning, in my opinion. But again, I'm not God. If I were God, I would be striking people with lightning. Right? I'm like James and John. God, you want us to call lightning down on them?
Yeah.
Right? If it was me, I would be calling lightning down on people. Be like, God, get their attention. Don't kill anybody. Just burn their house or their church down. Don't kill anybody. Just send some lightning and get their attention. Right? But that's not the way God is. God's like, look, this is my plan. This is how I'm doing it. If you don't want to go on doing it, I'll let you go on doing what you're doing, and I'll, in secret, do what I'm doing. And go right underneath your... See, that's another thing. We've got, unfortunately, in our American Christian mindset, we have, if there is a movement going on, we'll know about it. Right? And that's more from a pastor's side. If there's a disciple if something's really big happening in our area, I'll know about it. If God's moving in our area, I'll know about it. Maybe you don't. Maybe He's moving and it's going right under your nose because you're too busy doing what you've been doing the way you think it should be done. And it's happening right under your nose secretly, because Jesus is like, y'all go on and do what you're going to do. I'm going to secretly go do what I'm going to do. So how do we get around it when God does something different than we expect? How do we try to get around that? How do we try to explain that away? Well, we do. I mean, we do. I know I do, so what do we do? We make excuses.
Do it on our own terms.
Try to do it on our terms. Point fingers too, don't we? Well, it's this person's fault and that person's fault and this and that, and these people are doing this and those people are doing that. And if it wasn't for this and that, then this would work out right.
Wow.
The reason I'm saying these things is because this is what I do. I'm only telling you what I know from experience that I do when I don't like the way God is working out. So I have to look at these kind of stories. I have to learn from these stories and be like, look, God's doing it the way God has decided to do it. I don't get a 5-page paper explaining me how He's going to do it. I get the Bible explaining me how He's going to do it, which leaves some big gaps sometimes. And I just get the instructions that his brothers should have figured out by now. Be a disciple of Jesus who makes disciples of Jesus. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't understand the full scope of everything at that point in time, even when Jesus isn't doing exactly what you want Jesus to be doing, be a disciple of Jesus who makes a disciple of Jesus, and quit blaming other people and pointing fingers at other people and trying to explain your way out of it and trying to make excuses for yourself and make excuses for other people, and right? Because that's what I do. And ultimately, I had to come back to the stories like this, and this is why we're going over the life of Jesus the way we're going to it, and say, look, there's going to be times you don't really understand what Jesus is doing. And he's being the Messiah the way he has decided to be the Messiah, right? And he's working in the world the way he has decided to work in the world. And sometimes you get very limited instructions, because if he gave you the full story, you wouldn't believe it anyway. And so he gives you the limited instructions of be a disciple who makes disciples. Well, what about this? Well, if you do that, I'll work everything else out the way I want to work everything else out. You do your instructions. Look, you've been around me long enough and you know me well enough, right? Because that's his brothers. They've been around him long enough. They know him well enough. If you don't know him well enough, open up your Bible, start reading the Gospels, or play them on your phone. They'll read them to you nowadays, right? Know him. Get to know him if you don't know him, but if you know him well enough, be a disciple, and you go make disciples, right? And the make disciples thing, let me just get that, because I understand it's hard. And listen, y'all, I understand. One of the things I've noticed in our world right now, man, it's a hot mess. If you ain't noticed, y'all ain't noticed, our world is currently a hot mess. One of the things I've noticed is at work, people want to talk about the hot mess. Right? People want to talk about the hot mess. It's harder now to have a discipleship conversation than it was a year ago. You see what I'm saying? This is from my personal experience, right? Because if I have a conversation with somebody and I don't know them real well, I'm not. And it's not real blatant. It's not real blatant. But I'm gonna drop some phrases, and I'm gonna ask some questions, and I'm gonna try and find out where you're at spiritually, what you believe about Jesus. I'm gonna try and find out. That don't mean I'm gonna try and get you to be a disciple of Jesus first conversation. But as our conversations go, I'm gonna try and feel you out, figure out where you're at, right? It's hard, man. It's harder now than it was a year ago, because people just want to talk about the hot mess, you know. And hopefully the hot mess calms down for too much longer, and we can get back to having easier. But here's the thing: what if it don't? What if it turns into a hotter mess?
Yeah. But the Lord's still at work. We submit to what He is doing.
Right, and that's the point. What if it's a hotter mess than it is now? Guess what? I still need to be having discipleship conversations with people. Now look, again, here's the big thing. Don't try and get it in one conversation. I'm just telling you. Unless it's somebody that you know really well and you've already been having spiritual conversations, you're probably not going to. Now, there may be those miraculous times you get to the discipleship conversation, first conversation. Most likely not it. Most likely not. It's just start having conversations with people. And if you have to, try and memorize the armor of God if you can, and just memorize the sequence of truth, righteousness, peace, faith, salvation, the Word of God. Okay? Because what you can do is there, if you can remember that sequence, what's the first thing you need to talk to people about? Truth. What is their concept of truth? Do you see what I mean? What is their concept of truth? I can find out somebody's concept of truth without ever bringing God up. Right? We'll find out their concept of truth. I'm just going to poke and prod around in conversation to find out where are they getting their concept of truth from. Right? What are they basing that off of? Then can I try and slide in the conversation where I get my concept of truth from? Right? Well, then I need to move on to that. Righteousness. Righteousness is living out truth. We talked about this. We talked about the armor of God. You understand truth, then you live out truth. When you're acting on truth rather than deception, you produce righteousness in your life. What do they see as righteousness? Because how they see living out truth is how they see as righteousness. Whatever they see as truth is how they live out. And what is that producing? And if you can show them that what they're calling truth is really producing unrighteousness, well, then you can go back to that must not really be truth. You see what I mean? And so these are conversations I'm having. I don't even have to bring God into these things yet. I'm just saying this is a good outline to do. So we talk about truth, we talk about righteousness. Well, then we talk about peace. Right? Well, now I can talk about, this is where I really start talking about God, where I can talk about being at peace with God. I can talk about being at peace with other people. I can talk about being at peace with God. Right? And you see how I can take that as an outline and say, okay, I ain't got to go in full first conversation. Are you a disciple of Jesus? Do you want to be a disciple of Jesus? You're going to go to hell if you're not a disciple of Jesus. Right? You're probably not going to be a disciple of Jesus. Now, you might. You might. There might be that person who's at the end of the rope out there who's ready to make that leap anyway. But probably it's really talk about where you're getting truth. Where's your concept of truth? Where's it from? And just start. It's realize that you have this impetus. If you know Jesus, you have this impetus to make disciples of Jesus. Right? And just start working the conversations that way. I mean, that's first step. First, and yes, I'm going to affirm to you right now before you start doing it, it is hard, and it's harder now than it was a year ago. Okay? So that's just where it is. Now here's the thing. So what do we do? What's the encouragement we have? We come back to here, or we come back to our small groups, and what do? I had this conversation with this person. Here's how it went. You see what I mean? Then you can get some advice. What do you think I should talk to them about next? You know, if they start biting on the conversation, what can you do? You can invite them. You see what I mean? So there's always so the point being is that it's not a man, I got to go out here and convince somebody to be a discipleship tomorrow, or I'm not making disciples of Jesus. No, that's not the way it is. But do I need to start intentionally working my conversations and interactions with people towards making disciples of Jesus? Yes, I do. Right. And if I need to get to know Jesus better to be able to do that, then I need to set aside the time, I need to set aside the energy to get to know Jesus better so that I can have something to talk to people about.
Including with other Christians. Peter made his declaration of faith, and Peter's like, took Jesus aside, no, you're not going to go to the cross. This is not how
Right.
we want you to do it. And then he walked away after the crucifixion back to the business.
Right.
And Jesus said, no, you to follow me.
Yeah.
On my terms. And Peter finally got it.
Right. So one of the places you can start with is other believers.
That's right.
Start with them. Say, hey, anyway, we can talk about that some more on personal time. But there's conversations there's ways to do it. There's conversations they had, and yes, no, it's not easy. Yes, it is hard. But if you really go back to this story. Go back, think about this story. If his brothers really truly believed in him, that he was the Messiah, and that there needed to be disciples of him made, they would have went and made disciples of him. Simply knowing who Jesus was, simply knowing about Jesus, simply believing Jesus was the Messiah, and believing was not enough. They had to step over that line of disciples of Jesus need to be made, and that's my job, not Jesus' job. Now, there's a supernatural element of it, that Jesus is doing his part in it.
It comes as you follow him, because it says,
Right.
follow me, and then I will make you to be a
Right.
disciple.
We don't sit back and wait on, okay, God, when you start making disciples around me, I'll jump in. That's just not the way. Now, here's the thing, is he's working on people's hearts, he's working on people's minds.
Right.
And so really that's another trick of it, is you get far enough in the conversation, you figure out, is God working here? Because if you figure out God's not working there, I'm just not saying a human being is a waste of time, but don't overly invest
No, that's right.
your efforts when you can start talking to people and find somebody where God is working in their heart.
That's right.
And you never know who's working in their heart. You'll be surprised whose heart he's working in. All right, let's close in prayer, guys. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this story. We thank you that we can go back and we can look at this story and we can learn something about ourselves. That we can look and we can compare ourselves to this story and ask the question of what were they doing wrong, and how does that compare to what I'm doing wrong? And what should they have done, and how does that compare to what I should be doing? We ask, Father, that these stories of Jesus would remain in our mind as we go through or go through our lives, that when we're put in situations where we have to make a decision, we can look at these stories and we can say, well, you know, from that story, I know what I should do, and now I'm going to do it. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.